So every now and again, Tony gets fed up with Cobingham and all the noise and QRM around there, so he swans off to funny places. And tonight...
It's not funny, Botswana, it's quite nice.
He goes to Botswana, we go to Uganda.
And I go to Skegness. Right, I will leave you
Were you on the air? Were you on the air?
No, we don't hear anybody on the air.
Just one thing before I get started.
You want to get in here?
No, I can see that. Yeah. Some of you may recall I went to Christmas Island several years ago, T32C, as did Ian, as a member of the 5-Star DXers Association. Well, that's now wound up, and the man who started it off, who also those who are CDXC members will be aware, most probably, Neville Cheadle, G4LDL, sadly died. This week, wasn't it? This week. So, yeah, so that's another one. Silent key, I'm afraid. Don't play with your microphone, Tony. Can you drop us the lights down a bit, please? Okay, right, Botswana revisited. Well, why is it revisited? Well, it's revisited in 2017 because we went there in 2016. And, hello, how it is going, yeah. And that was the group that went there, terrible photograph I know, that was the group that went there in 2016, and we went there, I'll show you later on. There were just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, and we were there for about 6 days there. And we had more or less everything set up. We took some kit with us, but aerials and that were set up, and we had just a small part of the location where Stevenson Reserve. So why Botswana? Come on, it's slow. Oh, this is slow. No, so there's our first ones, and we're there for 6 days, and we made 20,000 Qs. The thing about that, at the end of it, the pile-ups are still there. I know, because I did the last QSO at 2 o'clock on the last morning, when I had to get up at 6 to go. 2 o'clock the last morning on 40 metres, and it was just... So, having done that, we sort of said, right, okay, it looks as though there's a requirement still. But I say, why Botswana? Well, Botswana is a known quantity because we've been in before, so why go there again? But why did we go there in the first place? Oh, A, because it's on the most wanted list, it's quite high. But the other thing is, it's relatively easy to get to, I'll explain that in a minute, and warm weather. Yeah, warm weather. Also, it was partly holiday safari. The other thing about Botswana, it's relatively safe. I mean, you never hear about riots or one tribe killing another tribe in Botswana. So it is actually relatively benign, shall we say, from that point of view. And they are used to tourists in some parts of Botswana. And because we had the pilots when we sort of finished the previous one, and because it was still 120 on the DXCC most wanted list, we thought, well, it's a doer again. It's a doer again. So we thought we'd go to Botswana. Now, it's sort of important to know where Botswana is. Don't look at the moment. Don't look. And why is it important to know what Botswana is? Well, let me tell you a little story. We were on 10 metres one day. It wasn't open all the time, but we were on 10 metres one day. No, we weren't on 10. We were on 15 or 20, that's right. And Nick, G4FAL, was working a UK station. And this UK station says, why aren't you on 10 metres? And we said, well, 10 metres isn't open. Oh, yes, it is. It's open. Well, not here, it's not. But it's open to Africa. Oh, is it? Right, OK. Where are you working? Morocco. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Yeah. Morocco. Botswana,
Yeah, Morocco.
UK, Morocco. You know, so it's sort of important that you get a picture. It's a slight matter of an equator between it and all that goes with it. So that was quite sort of that was made us laugh. That did, you know. It was a case of when that happened. Okay, so just a little bit about Botswana, not a phenomenal amount. Area, twice the size of the UK. That's mine. Oh, is that yours? Yeah. Population. Look at the difference in population. A couple of million compared to 66 million. A bit more space there. Capital and largest city is Gaborone, which was about 300 miles away. Yeah, so quite a lot. They don't earn much compared to us, but that's neither here nor there. They've got gold and copper and diamonds and things like that. And there we go. What's that? Okay, the main industry, they are diamond. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. Oh, I know. What? Looking at the age group here, who can remember the name Saretsi Karma? Anybody? You can. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Well, when I first started to read about Botswana, this name came up, and what he was the heir apparent to Botswana back in the 50s, I think, 50s, and they didn't want him to become king for various reasons. It was to do with the South Africa Trading Company and the UK. So they made Botswana a British protectorate. He was sent to England, and when he was in England, he fell in love with a white woman called Ruth Williams. And that made it even worse. They tried to keep him out, but in the end, given their due, he went back. He became king of the country, complete with Ruth Williams, and the country settled down and eventually got independence. But yeah, it's one of those names I can remember from when I was young, but I didn't know what it was. So if anybody is interested, there is a book called Colour Bar, which deals with their story. Okay. When we sort of started to think about going, the place we went was Stevensford Game Reserve, and it's right on the borders, because this border here is in fact the Limpopo River, and the border is sort of, we're right on there, so we are actually in Botswana because we're over to the other side of the river. But what we had to sort out was how many people were going to go. The first time we went, we had local support. We had local support from the people who owned the game reserve. I'll show you those in a minute, because they went and got our license for us. And a bloke called Daniel, who DX African Safaris, who I'd worked with before in Swaziland and Mozambique, so I knew him. And he'd bring aerials and stuff like that, so we didn't have to take aerials and all that sort of thing. And you'll see in a bit why that worked. So the first time we were there, we had three chalets, and it was a bit crowded. We had three stations in one chalet, and it was a bit crowded. So this time we reckoned that if we could have the whole thing at a reasonable price, it would work well. So that's what we did. So we decided on 10 was about right, so we could keep 5 stations going most of the time. Yeah, the support is from Daniel ZS6JR now. Unfortunately, since Botswana, he's had a stroke, and he's having to learn to speak and to walk again. So I think DX African Safaris is not going to be any more, which is a pity. So we decided we'd fly from Gatwick to Istanbul and then to Johannesburg, because it was £200 cheaper than going straight to Joburg. No more than that. We reckon it cost us about 3k each all around. That's including all flights. 26 hours door to door. A bit of a flog when you're coming back, particularly if you were working, until the last minute before you packed up. So the logistics, the local support we had, it is important to have support on the ground, was Daniel's company, CQDX African Safaris, to say, which I suspect will not be anymore. They have got a website. And this time we had the exclusive use of the game reserve. That's not strictly true. They did have some campsites that were usable, but it was not the time of year when people went. But we had the main sort of complex bit, which I'll show you a bit of later on. Now, yeah, licensing can be a problem. Daniel used to have a contact in Gaborone, but this year, that was in 2016, a local amateur in Gaborone got the license for us. This year, he wasn't there. So Linda, the owner of the Stevenson Game Reserve, actually sorted out all the license for it. And that's not easy, because Gaborone is nearly 300 miles away. So yeah, if you have to go and take documents, so they really did. So that's Stevenson Game Reserve. If you want to look it up, that's what you look it up, Stevenson Game Reserve. Come on. Oh, that's the license. Don't worry too much about that. Call sign A25UK. We had to bounce back on that because originally they only gave us 100 watts. And we thought, well, that's okay. We'll run 400, but no, we thought we'd better get it right. So we ended up with 500 watts. Okay. Right, that's Linda and Neil and the 2 dogs. And guess what the surname is? Armstrong. Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong. Okay. As all good expeditions do, you try and work out what you're going to need, down to the last nut, bolt, connector, bit of coax and that, and work it all out. And it was a bit awkward because if it had just been the 10 of us, we could have, you know, talked. But with Daniel as well, and Daniel wasn't the best communicator, we had to sort of nag Daniel to make sure that he got certain things. And what we did, in fact, that we then got all the bits together because we needed to network the PCs, make sure all the interfaces work with the RIDs and that. So we did have a day at Dave G4BUO's place doing that. One of the silly little things you have to remember, of course, is who knows what the electrical sockets are in South Africa? You will, I know. Anybody know? Yeah, the old 15 amp round. Yeah, the old 15 amp round. Yeah, so you need to do that. So we did a dry run which set up all the PCs and got the PCs talking to the rigs that we had got. We took, I think, 3 K3s. We took, yeah. Daniel had one, and we had an FT 1000 as well. Okay, typical departure fracas, you know, with load of cases. What we found with Turkish Airlines, they're very good. If you say you're going as a party, they just take your luggages one go. So it doesn't matter if one case is too heavy, if the other one's light. They were very good like that, both the first time we went to Botswana and again this time. But there was a lot of manoeuvring of stuff around to make sure that the things we didn't want in the hold weren't in the hold and stuff like that. We had a lot of problem on the way back, but that's another story.
What charges did they put on for the equipment?
We didn't have any extra weight.
Oh, right.
We didn't have any extra.
Well,
But
balancing it out across
yeah. But bear in mind that Daniel provided a lot of stuff, you see. So all the coax and all the stuff like that was all there. And coax, of course, can be heavy. So our heaviest stuff was rigs. We had PCs, rigs. I think we took 1 amplifier or 2. So yeah, we did have a fair bit, but between us, with there's 10 of us, we sort of, and we managed without, no, I lie, we had 2 Pelly cases we had to pay for, and it wasn't very much. Sorry, a couple of the amplifiers went in Pelly cases, but it was not particularly excessive. That one, I think, is in Istanbul, waiting 3 hours for the next flight. You know, typical. The other thing you've got to think about when you go somewhere like Botswana, and it got confusing this year, because the first year we went, if you look at a map of Botswana and look at the malaria line, the malaria line is roughly across the middle of Botswana. And so the line's there and we're there. So we took advice from Stevensford and they said, don't bother. Most of us took anti-malaria stuff, but it was only when we got there that we found there hadn't been malaria around for years, so we didn't bother. This year it's been very wet. So there are a lot more mosquitoes about. So this year we all took the anti-malaria stuff. And as a little side effect, it was quite funny because it's a generic thing called a version of Malarone. And I don't have any trouble with it. One of the effects you have is mouth ulcers. And we'd been there about 3 days and 2 of the lads had quite bad mouth ulcers. So they just stopped taking it. But I never had a bite this year. Last year I got bitten, this year I didn't have any. So it's something you have to be aware of, and you have to have jabs. And if you've been to some other countries in Africa, then you've got to have had a yellow fever jab. But only if you've been to some of the other countries in Africa. I've had a yellow fever jab, so not a problem. Okay, so that's Istanbul Airport. So off we went, got to Joburg, and went from there. That was, as we did both times, that's our transport. This year we had a minibus, and we had that, and that's a beautiful vehicle, a big Toyota. It's 7-seater, but I didn't get a picture of it. They have this trailer, you know, yellow coloured. Sort of. No, it's a big sort of box, big box trailer about this high, and it's got lots of lockable compartments, so you can put your kit in there and lock it when it's very substantial. And it's got a refrigerated compartment, so we stopped there for the beer. To take the beer with us, yeah. We got to be careful because we took some beer with us, but they came up with a good deal for us on the beer at the place this year, so we had to be a bit cautious. Okay, that was the border. That looks to me as though we've gone through the border there. That's the border post. Had no trouble this time. The first time we went, we did, because the bloke who was driving us hadn't got any Botswana money, so he went to change some, so we had to go over the border to change it, then come back. Huh? What? Came back, got in the queue again, went all the way down the queue, and they said, oh, that's old money, we don't use that anymore. So we had to go back again. It's Africa, man, it's Africa. But this time we got through fairly straightforward, it was okay. It's quite a long drive, so we sort of decided we'd stop and lighten the load of the beer a little bit, and that's the crew. You might know some of them, you know those two. That's Martin, that's Graham. That's Nobby and Giles were the two main instigators. Nobby was really the original instigator. Giles did most of the paperwork and the booking. Dave, fairly famous for you. The others, Nick, you would most probably know as well. But the others you most probably wouldn't know. But so that was us. Most of them, we're odd ones because, don't say that, don't answer that. Those, they're all part of Cray Valley Club. And it was Cray Valley Club that sort of, it started it. I mean, we first heard about it, Ian, didn't we, the first time round at the RSUB convention when Nobby was around looking for people. So I just jumped on the bandwagon, of course, having gone the first time, I'm in the second time as well. So yeah, except for Nick and Glennis and I, it was all Cray Valley. But no problem, it worked well. Right, so that's sort of about 2/3 the way up from Johannesburg where we went to the border. No, it isn't. We're in Mozambique. No, that's out of sequence. That is out of sequence. That is before we cross the border. But no matter. Right. We got to Stevensford. This is Stevensford Games Reserve. This is the main lounge area. And we got there, and that's what we met. We got there about 7 o'clock at night, and that's what we met. They had a meal for us, and a nice bar set up there, and I think we had complimentary drinks that night. That was one of the drivers. How's that? But you need to take a note of this because that's what it's like now. Just make a note of that there because we had to change that once we'd had our meal. We had to change that. And that was the start of it, getting rid of the stuff. And now you can start to see the clobber all around. And we've started to lay the tables out. And now that's it. So where you were before, you were more or less stood where I am there looking this way. So now we've got tables there that come along there and then down there like that. And that was the area we had. Now that looks nice and cosy, which it's okay. One of the main differences this time between last year, and I nearly got in trouble, last year it was warm. Same week more or less, it was warm. Even in the evenings it was warm. And in fact, at night it was a case of wear nothing and just have a sheet over, barely that. This year it was really cold in the evenings because, I mean, I know that here we had the, I think that was the LF one, I think, and that there is just an open window. No glass in it, and that's where all the cables came through. And if you were sat on top band or 80 metres at night, that was bloody freezing. Stupid part about it was just round this corner here, there's a fireplace. So if you're working on HF, you were stewing, and you're working around here, you had a blanket round you, but that, hey ho, that's how it goes. So that's us beginning to get the kit set out. Okay, then we get to the final layout, and that's more the final layout, you see. So that worked quite well. Quite light, quite airy. There's that open window with all the cables coming through. Fireplace is there. So if you were sat there, it was fine. And the bar is just to the left here. So, and mains electric, yeah, mains electric. That was one of the main problems was making sure you got enough adapters of various things, 15 to 13. No, there were plenty of them. If you look, oh yeah, there were no trouble. Well, there was once when there wasn't, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. Yeah, and we had a lovely bar set up. They were very good because we'd been there before. And basically, it was you wanted a beer, he's telling me to stop growling my microphone. You wanted a beer, you used to go and get your beer and just took it off on your tab sheet. So they were very good. It was very civilised, shall we say. Okay. Look a bit more at the stations. Right, we'll look at the aerials in a minute. So we didn't have to set it all up. Towers and some of the verticals. We didn't have all the verticals set up in advance by Daniel. And basically we had a range of skills and sort of predefined roles, like some were aerial people, some were get the PC set up people, some get the rig set up people. And then after that we mucked in. So basically we had, as I say, it's quite nice. We had 5 stations, lounge, self-service bar, and a shack dog. We had 2 shack dogs, in fact, our own exclusive space. Nobody else had that space at all. That was ours. Right, what came next? Oh, okay, right, let's have a look at some of the antennas. So that's an A4S, that's the main HF bands and a walk bands at 40 and 50 feet. Very nice, huh? Went well.
These already up?
Yeah, Daniel put these up. That's the second set of antennas. You know, they didn't go quite so well, but yeah, 3 and a 2 at that height aren't too bad. Yeah, Daniel had all these set up beforehand. Right, we had to do some of the antennas, and Daniel had put some of the verticals up, but we had to put some up, and that was them getting set up to put some of the spider poles up, laid out and put up. And we did have a beverage. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, that's some of the control stuff. Daniel was very good. He's got quite a lot of good control stuff and good boxes. For example, if you were changing an area from 80 to 160, no, on 160, if you were changing from sideband to, you have to nip out and change a coil, and the same on 80, but it worked fairly well. Right, that is our 80 metre vertical and a 40 metre four square. Very nice. Worked well as well. Worked well as well. Really did work well. Okay. So that's that side. That was one side. That was towards. We had to be careful because the path walking from the from where the shack was to where our accommodation was this path down here. So we had to be careful at night walking down. You didn't trip over things. And there were there were loads of radials down. You see, a load of radials down. Radials all over the place. Unlike T32, we were able to have soft aluminium radials. When at T32, we had soft aluminium radials on the verticals on the edge of the sea. And how long did it take them to melt in? About 5 days, if that. If that, 5 days, and the salt had done it. But we didn't have that trouble there, nothing like that trouble there. So let's have a look at so that's them thinking about setting up the 160 metre one. Now that's the 160. So that's the 160 metre vertical. And then that's 30 metre four square. It's in the trees, but it didn't seem to make much difference. Biggest trouble we had with this one was we had to have little elevated radials, and it was quite difficult actually getting them elevated without taking them across a track where somebody would drive. We managed it in the end though. But it took us a while to set those up, but they set right up. And then right at the end, we stuck up a little Cushcraft R5, so that's 20 metres and up. You might think, what on earth do you want that for? But just occasionally, we didn't have enough aerials. You know, if you're on the HF bands, and you're limited to what you can do with 2 sets of aerials, because you have to be careful, you know, pointing. If you've got 2 stations working 20 metres, one on sideband, one on CW, you just about manage it with the out, but not if you start pointing at one another. If you happen to make a mistake and point at one another, so you have to be a bit careful. So that little Cushcraft R5 was quite good for odd bits and pieces. I did mention a beverage. We had a beverage antenna. You all know what a beverage is? Yeah. It's a receive antenna. It's just a long wire. The longer the better. And you have there's several sorts, but that was a beverage about this height. You can have a bog beverage on the ground. I don't know how they work. But in areas where it might be noisy, like this is quite noisy on LF. Anywhere in the tropics is sort of noisy in LF, and these can be much better. They get rid of a lot of the noise that your verticals will do. So that's a receive antenna, and that's Nick walking down the receive antenna. And how well that worked, eh? What, the fence? The fence went all the way. It didn't matter. There's nothing in there. Just the odd monkey or something, and that's not a monkey. Yeah. No, we did have monkeys around. So we had the beverage. I never did work out how long it was. Nick put it out. But how well it worked, I was working, I think, on 80 metres one night, because we used it on 80 and top band. I was working 80 metres one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, something or other. And I was working CW, which is not my forte, but I had to do it. And I was working Western Europe. Not too bad. And I got one W, one American came in, and he was loud. And I thought, what? Why? So I didn't think any more about it. So I called for America, nothing. So I thought, it's strange. And I suddenly thought, hang on, what antenna am I on? And I was on the beverage. Switched off the beverage, the vertical, whoomph, from the States. So that beverage pointed at Western Europe had chopped out most of the States. So, and that's one of the things the beverage is for, not just receiving weak signals, but also for being very directional. You know, the signals are much weaker. So the beverage did work very well from that point of view. So what did shack equipment, we had 4 K3s and 1 Yaesu FT 1000 MP. Guess which rig we had the most trouble with? Only from the point of view, we know that, because when I was in Mozambique, we had a K3 and a 1000, and we had one or two. And the phase noise on the 1000 was quite bad. But for what we wanted them for, it worked. It worked. But the K3s, and the K3s were all slightly different. They didn't all have the same bits in, which was a pity. But that was okay. We had two icons. That's right. We had one without a linear. We never ran a linear on RTTY. We had two Tokyo high powers and two. People knock old linears, but these things don't half go. They go and they just keep going and keep going and keep going. I think those of Daniel's must be about 10 years or more old, and they still keep churning out there, and you can abuse them and they still keep going. So that's what we had there. We had 5 network laptops, each with separate keyboards, one for each station. 3 micro hams. We also had me and Rig and James, Rig Expert Plus. We had that with the 1000. So that worked okay, mainly on DW. And we had various power supplies. The Morse gurus amongst them, which was Graham, Nick, Dave, and I got railroaded, but I don't have my old paddle because I'm a keyboard sender. But the others were proper CW ops. They had their own paddle sort of thing. We had all sorts of Ethernet switches. Rotators and 4 square controllers, yeah. You'll see later on, I'll tell you, that was a bit of a problem because you had the 4 square controllers, and depending on how the bands went during the day, you couldn't always say that station's going to be on that band. We had to do some fiddling around with that. And there's a little story about the 4 square controllers, which could have turned out quite nasty. I might not have been here. It's like that. Okay, that's a typical sort of station. Okay, so you've got radios to one side, laptop in the middle, wherever the operator wanted it. Separate keyboard and mouse. Micro keys were usually on top of the radio. Now the rotator controllers, as I say, they were movable because obviously if you had 4 stations on HF, then one had the big mouse, one had the other, but one had to follow the other aerial. We didn't have separate walk aerials. They had to be pointed where the others were. In general, that wasn't a problem. Linears were also tucked normally out of the way. Can you turn that thing on for me, please? Yeah, somebody decided that was funny with the little dog. There was another dog as well, actually, but that's all right. Okay, so why couldn't we hear you? Well, the pile-ups were continuous. There were times when the bands died, but the pile-ups were pretty continuous all the time, except on LF, obviously. On LF, it was hard work some of the time.
Coming from a particular direction, or pretty well in?
No, depending where you were beaming, usually. That's where the 4 squares were good, because it did mean you could negate the effects sometime or other. One of the big problems we had, apart from people don't listen, people don't shut up when you ask them to, a lot of people, and particularly noticed this with the Japanese, you'd get somebody call like you'd get, and it'd sound like MN5 something, MN5. And then if you give his call sign twice, it was di-da-da, di-da-da-da-da. And obviously where their switching was such that their CW, the CW transmission went before the linear was across. And that was quite common. That lost the first character, and sometimes if it was really bad, you lost, perhaps two characters. So there were quite a lot of stations had that trouble. I have that trouble on the 2-meter ACs. When somebody comes back to me, I'll get 0 da-da-da-da because my amp hasn't switched back over okay, and they fired in quickly, and I've missed whether it's G or whether it's M. But it's not much I can do about that. If they're going to come back to me, there's not much I can do about it. Yeah, we CW readers revs have been used because there were several stations. Obviously, were big stations, but they couldn't hear us that well, and yet they were. Yeah. Right. Let's see if this works. I want to talk to you about this when we finished. If you use presenter mode. Back with this last night.
Is it working on the speaker?
Yeah, it was working on this speaker.
Yeah.
Doubt it.
Yeah.
It's just not going. Okay, don't worry about it. I'll have to do it later on. Why won't that go there? So I wouldn't have minded, but I deliberately tried it last night. See, it doesn't want to.
I assume the speaker volume is up on the...
Oh, that's a thought. That's a
Yeah,
thought. That
yeah,
is
it
a
was.
thought. And it wasn't.
Well, it was quite high.
No, it wasn't, because it wasn't switched on.
2,
Oh.
Radio Bravo
you.
Kilo, you're 5 and 9. Thank you, QRZ.
Got to go to the end of this because that's what I couldn't do because I couldn't over is the clip. I wouldn't stop that and then start that.
Juliet Alpha 1, Queen Whiskey Tango,
Not
5
too
and
bad.
9.
Is that fully up? Is that fully up?
Good evening, you're 5 and 9.
Yeah, that's the best I can do then.
Good evening from Botswana. This is Alpha 25, Uniform Kentucky, listening up 5.
Graham. Not too bad a pilot, that one. You can pick
Oscar
things out.
November X-ray 5 and 9.
Juliet November 3, Oscar November X-ray. Juliet November 3, Oscar November X-ray.
Good one.
Juliet November 3, Ocean November X-ray 5 and 9.
Also 5 9, thank you.
Thank you, QRZ.
What I found this time is the Japanese pronunciation is better. I know first time when I started to work a load of JAs in Swaziland and Mozambique, it's a struggle to pick that pronunciation up.
Japan,
Either I'm
Lima,
getting better
you're
or-
5 and 9.
Juliet 3, Juliet Lima, JJ 3,
Lima.
Lima.
I cannot say Lima, I cannot say L. Right. Oh, that's not bad, that one. Right, let's try the other one. Oh, that's not really there, is it? Yeah, Chris. JH1 I got, that was about as far as I got. Now, Dave and Graham and Nick, they would hear that and they'd have one straight away. I'd have to listen to that twice before I got a full call. They would get one and they just... Are they what? Yeah. But it's the listening. I mean, you can send as much as you like. If you can't hear it, you can't send back. You do. But again, it's interesting that Nick and Dave, Graham not so much, run with the CW filter wide, right? And they pick one out of that. I can't do that. I have to narrow it right down and try and pick one out like that. I can't run it wide like that. I just cannot pick anything out. Can you, Ian? You can do that now, can you? Yeah. Yeah, it is about practice, there's no doubt about it. Oh, I know, hear different things. Where do I want? I want slideshow from the current slide, don't I?
Shift F5.
10,000 hours you need.
10,000 hours. Okay, so that was one of the reasons we might not have been able to hear you because it's playing now, isn't it? It's playing now.
It was doing it
Yeah.
before.
Okay. Yeah, we just I'd forgotten to turn the speaker off earlier. Okay, so how did we get with Qs? Yes, thank you. No, I haven't, but we can put it on again in a minute. QSO count and expectations. Well, we made 20k in 2016 with 5 ops, 3 stations. This time we planned for 40, but in fact we made 44k. And Europe took the lion's share. Europe is the blue, US is the brownie colour, Asia is the green, and the others are bits. So they were the thing. Now I didn't do these stats, somebody else did them, and 1 or 2 I've had slight trouble in interpreting. Okay, so that's bands versus mode, if you like, a number of Qs, and that's what you'd expect really. These are the bands, that colour. Brown is CW, that's phone, and RTTY is the little plod at the bottom now. RTTY is slow, and the pile-ups in RTTY were huge as well. Glennis was running RTTY most of the time, and it was quite difficult. But But
Did you try and get
eh?
data modes?
No. Don't have time. Don't have time. You know, if you want to say, I mean, the RITI pilots were still as high at the end. So, you know, just people want a data contact. They've had a data contact. You know, that was our view. The other thing we didn't do, which I never mentioned, we were offered sponsorship actually from one of the equipment manufacturers, but we declined. We decided we want to do our own thing and be beholden to nobody. And that's just how we did it. Yeah, it's fairly, if you look at the various bands, it's fairly obvious, except on the obvious 2015 and 17, where sideband was up close. Most of it was CW was more than the rest. That was partly just band conditions. You know, sometimes you could work a band on CW and there was nothing there. And that's one of the strange things. I found this before in the tropics. I think we found it on C32 as well. You can have a band that will be open. The band above will be open on CW. The band you're on will be open on CW. There's nothing on sideband. Not a thing. Just weird and wonderful. All to do with MUFs or something. I'm not really sure how it is. But we did find the propagation quite strange. Oh yeah, so that was CW, sideband. Bear in mind that CW has an advantage because 10 megs is CW only. RITI 3000. I thought we'd done more than that RITI. That bothers me a bit. I thought we'd done more than that, but I haven't got the logs, so I can't argue. What band and modes did best? Well, that's over the period. That's just a graph over the period of time. So CW was always slightly above sideband and RITI, and bands that did the best, where you'd expect really, 14, 17. You know, we didn't do any sideband on top band, would you believe? We did some on 80, but that's because Nobby, G4LDL, he always has a sked with Cray Valley Club, and they always work some. So we did actually do some sideband on 80, which is not easy. It's quite difficult, in fact. They're very noisy. Right, what band modes did best? That's just, again, that's sort of interesting. The hours of the day, it just goes to show that it's very similar to you'd expect it in the UK. Like, you know, the LF bands are the blue, so they're darkness hours, and the others are in daylight hours, the higher bands in daylight hours, what you'd sort of expect. One of the things that Daniel said, and I was trying to work out if it applied in this country. I suppose it does to a certain extent, but when we started off in the morning, Daniel always said, when you're thinking of switching from LF to HF, follow the sun, just point at the sun. And it works, that's what we did. So you'd start off in the morning and you start off with JA and gradually work around. So it worked very well, certainly in HF. That's QSOs per hour of the day. That's the modes, that's bands. There's lots of statistics, but that's just equalised out to show you the proportion. Similar with that one, that's just a leveled one. So it's more or less what you'd expect, you know, LF at night, CW most probably slightly more than sideband, RITI just ticking along. This one I don't understand. I didn't do it. I don't understand it. That's supposed to be most of the EU stations in the log. What nobody can tell me is what all this lot here is. So I'll ignore that slide. That was in statistics that was given. No, yeah, that's what I mean. That doesn't make sense. That one, it's got W and JA. Yeah, I have asked for interpretation. That one, not got it. Okay, this is quite important because you get used, don't you, to where to point a beam. If you've got a beam, I'll accept that. Where to point your beam, and you notice the difference in from France, don't you, Ian? Yeah. I mean, where's Australia from? What sort of heading is Australia here? 60, 70 degrees, something like that? Yeah. Not from down there, it's not. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Not from down there, it's not, it's down there. So you have to get used. And the other thing is, look at the range that the States. I mean, basically the States, you can do what, 270, 300, something like that around here. But you've got almost 90 degrees there if you're going to work the States with any sort of degree. So you do have to. I actually did, but unfortunately, it got lost and coming back. I actually did a version of this map where I'd put round the outside, I'd put arrows and the beam headings for various countries. But it's quite different, and anywhere you go like that, you really have to be aware of the differences. Okay, so did we do what we intended to do? Yeah, we did. Could you put the speaker on again there? Okay, so our target was 40 thou. No, wrong one. Oh, it isn't the wrong one. Why isn't that going? I've got another one that's not going then, okay. Okay, don't forget, but that, no, I don't want to come out and do it. That's actually got a, I wonder if I have to click on it. No, it's not going to go, is it? If I click on it?
Be hiding underneath it.
Sorry. No, I just,
Sierra Mike 7, Sierra Echo Lima 59.
That's Giles. Notice everybody else is standing around.
QRZ Alpha 25 in 4 kilo.
Japan goes dead.
Tango 9.
Japan November 1. Japan November 1 again. Japan November 1. Romeo Queen Lima 59. Thank you very much. QRZ Alpha.
It was our 40,000th kill. We let Giles do it on purpose because he'd done most of the organising, most of the arranging the flights, arranging everything with Stevensford and all that. And in true tradition, we did take some champagne as well. So, okay, so will that move on from there? Is it going to go? I think we did that on the next to last day. No, not about the last day. Yeah, next to last day, I think. Yeah. Now, power and equipment failures. Some salutary tales here. We had one mains power outage. That was on the last day, and it was 80 minutes, and that was a mains thing. And the power there runs miles and miles and miles. But the real, what comes next? Okay. Oh yeah, we did have one amplifier fail. That failed one day into the operation. It turned out to be its internal power supply. Got a couple of whiz kids there. Daniel had got a spare power supply, and they hooked it into there, and that worked the rest of the way. No trouble at all. No trouble at all. No, I don't want to go there yet. Okay. I ought to mention that we nearly had a bit of a disaster. Those of you who know me know that if I go somewhere like that, one of the first things I do is wear all the switches. Where's all the electricity? Where are the trip switches? If it goes off, where do I look? Fortunately, I'd done that. We had one night where it had been very quiet, so the people who were staying on late had packed up. It was nothing on, the top band was not on, 80 wasn't on, so they'd gone to bed. And I was due to come in about half an hour before dawn. So I went in, still dark, went in. So we tended to leave everything running, and I decided I was going to go on a certain band, but I wanted one of the 4 square controllers moving. So, got a shock off that. Oh, okay. Okay, that's okay. Out go the lights. Fortunately, being as I am, torch in pocket, knew where the trip switch was. Trip switch on. Okay. What was that then? Okay, so just try it again. Ding, just tap it. Okay. Move it slightly. Dang, out go the lights. So that was an actually faulty 4 square controller that, because we had a trip switch, I didn't get, but the salutary lesson there was if that had shocked me, nobody else came in there for an hour. I'd have been down on the floor and out. And so you do have to be careful with these things. It was actually a faulty controller. We had to change it. And it was okay till you touched some other earth and then, ooh. Okay, so that was a sort of lucky thing. Could have been a lot worse, but equally because I'd taken the precaution of saying to the owner there, where is the trip switch? I was able to go and put it all back in. Eh? Oh no, it's pretty good network then, yeah. Okay, but it wasn't all radio. We didn't go there to do total radio. Well, some of us did, some of us didn't. But mainly the idea always was that we'd have a day out somewhere, and we split into 2, and we did that. And that was the group that I went out with, and we went off to another safari place. I'll tell you a bit more about the geography of those in a minute. And that was our lunch stop on the way back by the Limpopo. No mosquitoes, no nasty flies, no nothing. It was lovely, nice and warm. Yeah. No, they were just wardens who they'd taken us on the safari thing. So that was quite good. I think Glenys took that photograph. That's why she's not in it. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah. And we did see some wildlife. What's that then? Wildebeest. You know what that one is? Surprisingly, we saw ostriches. Yeah. Now that is interesting. Where we went to, the whole bit along the Limpopo there is a bit called the Tully Block, and it's a long strip about 50k wide that many years ago, when Botswana was first being sort of set up, was deliberately kept there for wildlife, because wildlife was getting killed left, right and centre. And they've got these strips. I think Stevensford is about 5 kilometres wide, but some of them are much bigger than that. And we went to one, we're not allowed to say where it is because of the rhino. We went up there and we had a look around this one, and they have got 8 rhino. They did have 9, but the week before one had been killed by an elephant. They've got 8 rhino, including the little one, and we saw 7 of them. And we saw, the big one we saw was roughly where that camera is. Fortunately, it was between, there was a big, deep thing. But that one, that was about 3 weeks old. The mother had been in captivity somewhere, so was sort of not scared off by humans. So what we actually did, and they had men with guns watching her, okay, to try and make sure that they were protected. And what we did, we sort of sidled in, and we got within, say, about the distance that camera to there. And they talked to her because she'd been used to humans. They talked to her. But it was quite interesting talking to these blokes, because I said to them, well, what happens if you find somebody come in to try and poach them? They said, don't ask. And we thought about that, and the 2 who run Stevensford now are not the owner and his wife. They're a couple of youngsters, and they're conservationists. And we got talking to them about this. Well, how does this work? And they said, well, how it works, they have a whole different view of wildlife in Botswana. Wildlife, let it get on with it, sort of thing, except for the game reserves. But if somebody's caught poaching, they have to go in front of the local magistrate. Then they have to go one up from there. But the attitude tends to be, well, they're there for the taking, so why bother? So they go out and poach again. So this is why the attitude of the blokes guarding the rhinos is, don't ask. Because there's no use capturing them, because they won't go to jail. So, and in fact, 2 of them had been poachers, 2 of these lads. But yeah, so it's quite sort of surprising, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, and what else did we see? We saw giraffe, of course, zebra. That's a typical sort of road. And to get to the, Oh, a lot of Toyotas, yeah, a lot of Toyotas. The day we went to this wildlife park, we started out about 7 in the morning, and it was nothing cold. And I was sat with somebody else. There's like a seat up on top there with a hood on it, and we were sat up there wrapped in blankets, and I was ruddy frozen, absolutely frozen. And these roads are ever so bumpy, you know, and they're good. But about 75 miles we went on roads like that. That's a good one. Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah, that is quite a good one. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you know. So there we go. But not only did we have the wildlife resort safari, we did have some local wildlife as well. Hang on a minute. We did have some local wildlife as well. He was quite common. He was round. I mean, that's the shack in there. Yeah. Hey, I don't know what sort of snake it is. It's a snake. Hey?
So don't get too close.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently it wasn't poisonous, that one, but there were some poisonous ones about. But he was quite a regular visitor. You'd find him sunning himself on there quite a lot. And that's a little tree frog. Now that one you'll see in a minute where we were, where we had our meals, that we had some like tree decorations. He loved it. He got in this tree decoration. He'd stay there. You'd take him out. You'd put him somewhere else. Turn around. 5 minutes later, he was back. Oh, yeah, yeah. There was lots of tree frogs. And we were lucky, Glenys and I, in the room we had no geckos and that in the loo. Almost everybody else had geckos in the loos, you know. You know. That's a little kingfisher. That's only a young one, and that one actually flew in and hit one of the windows. so stunned itself. So we picked it up, and the manager Greg had a look at it and said, "Yeah, it'll be all right in a minute." Put him outside, and off he went. So you know, there was all sorts. And then there were pests. Ants. Now that's a control cable. And we had X-control cables, X-coax cables, all coming through that window. And once the ants were on it, that was it. It was forever. CQ, CQ, you know, can't you? They really were a pain. They were a struggle to get them. Now, I mentioned that the two managers who ran the place were conservationists, and part of the job they do is keep an eye on the wildlife, health-wise. And one of the things they have to do, they have to do a survey every now and then and count the animals. Because if you've got too many, then they run into trouble. And one of the things that they do, they like have a norm, which is, say, a wildebeest, because you have animals that graze, you have animals that browse, you have animals that eat the tall trees. And depending on how the weather's been, depends on which of those are catered for. So they have this sort of norm, and they say, right, okay, a wildebeest is worth 1.5 of these and 2 of those, whatever. And they do a count and say, okay, we've got that many, but we haven't got much grass this year. We've got a lot more greenery on the trees and that, and they have to cull or move to do it. And because all this lot's fenced in, they also have to go around repairing fences, and occasionally they find all sorts of bits and pieces. And one day they found that. Now that had been there a day or two. I didn't go because I was more interested in the air, but some of the others went, and they went to have a look at this dead giraffe. Well, it was old age, it died off. Glenys said she went and had a look. She said it was a real hole, you know, his job. But the eyes had gone, and there were things crawling out of its bum and things like that. But what these two, that's Greg and that's Zoe, what they wanted to know was, that's now potential meat for predators. So they wanted to know, what predators have they got? So what they were doing, she's going to set a little camera up. They set a camera up there and a camera up there. And they set cameras up, and they then watch. You know, they go and check the cameras from days to day and see what predators are there. You know, so they were actually fascinating talking to these two. It really was. We learned much more about what goes, how goes, and all that. I mean, there's millions of slides. I could have kept going with slides like that all day. Okay, our accommodation. Okay, no, it's not a honeymoon bed. It's a ruddy mosquito net. It's a mosquito net. Yeah, which we didn't need much this year. Did last year. We didn't need much this year. I never had a bite this year. Last year, the first year we went, if you were working in the evening and didn't put trousers on, you get bitten to death. This year we didn't have that problem at all, but it wasn't so warm this year. Okay, so that was sort of our accommodation. Sort of, we're in little huts like that. They're quite nice inside though. That's the area where the shack is in there. Okay, that was quite good. So the aerials there's some aerials over the back there. There's one of the towers out here, and one of the towers is out here. They're all quite long rungs of coax, but they were quite good. There's that's looking out of the shack area to where some of the lads were in there. That, if the weather was fine, and we had rain one day, 10 minutes, and you'd have got drowned. It rains there, it rains. Yeah, that was a table where we had our lunch most days, and we didn't stop operating. Always somebody stayed. We always did a rotating jobby for lunch. That's Zoe and Greg, fantastic. They, with the help of locals, she basically did all the cooking, and the food we had was fantastic. And we did have zebra, and we did have wildebeest, and the meat, eh? Don't think we had any ostrich, I don't think. Because what they do, if they've got too many, they have to get permission to cull them. What they prefer to do is move them somewhere else. So they'd got too many zebra this year. So what they actually were doing, they'd got 20, they were going to catch 20 and move them over into South Africa, where apparently it's okay. But they are allowed to kill sufficient for their own meat, and they got a big freezer store, not a freezer, a big freezer store. Well, Gaborone is 300 kilometres away, and there's not much in the way of shops. There's not much in the way of shops, yeah. So that was the sort of accommodation. That was where we ate most of the time. The little thing is not there now. There was a like little decoration in there that the tree frog got into. So basically, we came down and ate in our turn. That was about 500 metres from the shack area, so you could get away. That's where she heated everything up. We had a fridge over there with beer. We had a fridge over there with beer. If you wanted, we could have a little fire here. So it was very, very pleasant. Very, very pleasant. So we went there with certain targets in mind. Did we get those targets? Did we achieve our targets? You bet. We went expecting 40,000 and we got 44,378. Did we work all parts? Not. First time we went, propagation to the States was pretty good. In fact, it was at unexpected times. First time we went, I remember on 20 metres, working JA in the States in one go. Didn't get that this time at all. It was very definitely a case of JA, Europe, stateside. And the propagation to the States was not so good this time in any band. Mode balance, well, to some degree that's propagation. A lot of the time CW was okay, sideband was quite difficult. We actually had 4 main CW ops and me. So that made it a bit sort of right. Sometimes there was nowhere for a sideband op to work because sideband wasn't open enough, but we were somewhere near. We were somewhere near. The team worked well together. We had no prima donnas. The people who started it looked. I know Graham, who it was his first time. He talked to me on the way back. He said, I didn't realise people made inquiries about me. I said, yeah, well, they do. You've got to. You can't afford to have anybody that's going to rock the boat. You really can't. So the team worked well together. We all got on great. Did we have fun? Yeah, it was good. It was good. Could we have done better? Yeah. The switching between antennas, we could have had better. We had a lot of Dune Star filters. So whenever we moved, I think I mentioned that in a minute, we had to manually do the filters. So when we changed bands, we might have been able to switch between antennas better and the filters. Rotator controllers, sometimes that was a problem just with the two. You know, if you ended up in a mess where you ended up with 20 metres there, the 20-metre big antenna there, and the 17-metre antenna on the same tower, same rotator, at the other end, you know, and it's not a case of not planning, it's a case of when the band's open and how it goes. But we could have controlled that a bit better, possibly. We could have done with another beverage for the States, another beverage out for the States, that would have helped. We possibly could have had a second digital station, but we were not very happy with that. We wondered whether we should have had a beacon on 6, but May, yeah. We could have had a second PC used as a beacon. One of the problems we had, I don't know, I still didn't get to the bottom of why. We used WinTest at DXpedition, but for RTTY we used N1MM and MMTTY. So of course we couldn't merge the logs, so we always had to add the log in. We uploaded the logs daily. But it did mean that anybody who had a device connected to the internet, like a phone, had to turn it off and disconnect it. Otherwise, it wouldn't go. But we did upload to Charles, M0OXO, every day, and he put it on Logbook of the World. So most days, I think one day we missed, didn't go, but most days we loaded. All the rigs didn't have voice keys for sideband. The 1000 did because I'd got it on my rig expert, but I'd got it, but we didn't have voice keys for sideband. When you're doing 10 days and a lot of queues, it does help. It does help. Clublog, yeah, we had a daily upload by Charles. I say we did have a problem with the satellite internet link that they have, and that's interesting to note. One day the upload failed. And we immediately got a lot of people who worked the day before coming back again. The dupes increased. So there is a big advantage in the expeditions uploading quickly. It does stop dupes. Charles is the QSL manager. And did anybody work us, by the way? No, Ian did, yeah. Okay, nobody at all, okay. Does anybody know what this is about? Who uses Clublog? Okay. And if you want a QSL card for the exhibition on Clublog, you look for the OQRS software, and then you can go in there, contribute $1, $2, $3, whatever they want, and it automatically does your QSL card. Okay, that was a sort of a better view of the QSL card a minute. Yeah, so yeah, I've already repeated that already. That was the QSL card, which is quite sort of nice. And then, where to next? Well, now Daniel is sort of not in full health, unless somebody else takes the cudgel on DX Africa Safaris. If Daniel doesn't come back to health, then that's one source of very good support. Aerials and that gone. I say I've used him in Swaziland, Mozambique. There, I know he's been there several times before with other the expeditions. He's been Swaziland and Lesotho before, all putting aerials up and providing kit. If that's not there, there's a big hole, and it may well stop the expeditions in that southern part of Africa, or the expeditions of that size. I mean, that's not a huge one, but if you look at the aerial resources we had, we wouldn't have been able to take all that ourselves. Well, 2 trailer towers, boom, you know. So, any question? That's the group. Any questions I haven't dealt with, or any? No.
Did you put the rigs in hand luggage?
Some of them, yes. I think most of it went in hand luggage. Yeah. Coming back, we had a bit of an issue because it was the time when they said, both the UK and America had said, countries coming from, flights coming from certain countries, you cannot have your, no, you can't put PCs and that in your hand luggage, hold luggage, they must be. But when we're flying from Johannesburg to Istanbul, they don't care. So some of it went in the hold luggage. So then we get to Istanbul and say, it's in the hold luggage. No, it can't be in there, it's got to come out. So we have to take it out. And you can't leave it in your hand luggage. So you have to take it and declare it when you get there. And they take it off you. They inspect it, look at it, rifle through your bag, say, okay, and they take it off you. And put it in the hold. That would made us laugh. Anybody else?
Do you have problems with Turkish baggage handlers? Because they've got a bit of a reputation.
No, the luggage went mainly straight through. We didn't see any problems. No, I don't know of any problems. How things pan out. When we got back to Gatwick, Dave Biua, we all went for our stuff, and we went looking for the Pelly cases that were in the heavy luggage, and we found those okay. And Dave, G4 Biua's bag didn't come. Now, Dave fortunately lives in London, and Dave was going home on the tube. So, in the end, we decided, we said, we'll all go, I'll see if I can get it. And we got a note from him later on saying it was something to do with, God, my head these days. What's the dried beef? The dried animal. No, not biltong. Biltong's the word it was after. It was biltong, something to do with he got biltong in his bag and they didn't like it. And one or two of the others are going, okay. They'd all got biltong in their bags, hadn't they? Anyway, it turned out it wasn't that at all. For some reason, they decided they wanted to pick a bag up and go through it thoroughly, and that was Dave's, and it was so late coming out. And they said, oh, okay. Well, it looks though it's all right, but it's sort of, we've still got it. And Dave said, don't care. I'm going home, because he lived in London on the tube run. Bring it to me tomorrow? I said, yeah, fine. So Dave waltzed all the way home with no luggage to count, but he got it okay. So that was one of those little things. Anybody else? Pity one or two more didn't work, because that was a bit sad. Did anybody try and work us? Did you not hear us at all? Could you?
I heard you. You didn't hear me.
No, I didn't hear you. Yeah. Not that you didn't hear us at all. No. Sad. Well, how many bands do you work as on here? You can't remember. No. That was from here, wasn't it? From the UK.
When was it?
May. Beginning of May. Early May. In the UK. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, it was great fun. Well, that's the team. He was the original instigator. Nick is the computer bod. Giles did all the paperwork, booked the flights, all the arrangement with Stevenson and that. Dave, fantastic CW operator. Guy's a bit of a laugh. He with Daniel repaired the amp that went bust. Graham's another damn good CW operator. You know, they'll hear a pile up and they've got a call sign that and written down. I'm going, well, I got the G bit, you know. Yeah. Well, looking at the rate of CW QSOs, they did roughly twice what I did, and I was doing roughly the same time. That's the way it is. I'm not a CW, but I've seen her before somewhere. She did most of the RITI. We tried to get her on voice, but she wouldn't have it. You wouldn't have it. There we go. Toby, he was another laugh. And Martin, yeah. And that's Daniel, who sadly now, as I say, is having to learn to walk and to talk again. I understand. There we go. Eh? Doesn't look what? Daniel, yeah. But he's one of these healthy diet merchants. He's a vegetarian. Doesn't overeat anything. He's skinny as anything, and he's had a heart attack. There we go. Okay, so if you want any more information, there we go. Okay, can you? Now you know how to do the light, Chris. Do you think you could put the light on for me, please? Just press and hold the top, please, Chris. Anybody else? Okay, it's worth doing if you get a chance to go on a trip even like that. It's worth doing. It really is. Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Okay, thanks all.